Mr. Chairman, in a second I'll yield to you for the answer to a question, but I think there are some things we all agree on. This is a very important issue. We've debated it at length. Reasonable and good-spirited people can reach different conclusions, and democracy ought to determine what our policy should be. So, Mr. Chairman, will you be doing everything possible so that this committee or the House is voting on whether to reauthorize the Ex-Im Bank in the next couple of weeks?
Is the gentleman yielding to the Chairman?
Yes.
The Chair will not make a decision until after this hearing. I will listen to all colleagues. I am not aware of any bill that is supported by a majority of the House, much less a majority of this committee. If I'm made aware of such, I assure you it will influence my thinking. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
We may have a chance to look at bills supported by a majority or perhaps a 60% majority of the United States Senate. And there are many bills that come to this committee that we mark up that are not co-sponsored by a majority of the House or a majority of the members of this committee. I think if this committee has a markup, we will devise a bill that has majority support, perhaps taking into consideration the comments of the gentleman of Pennsylvania that we have restrictions on not allowing Ex-Im Bank to operate in those countries that have horrific records on human trafficking. Also, the gentleman from Pennsylvania focuses on the need to try to get other countries to ratchet down their export promotion authorities. That is a responsibility of the Department of Treasury. Without objection, I'd like to put on the record the last 3 annual reports of the Department of Treasury.
Without objection.
And I'll point out that I don't think they're doing as much as they should. But the next administration hopefully will, and the next administration will have nothing. It's like going to a gunfight without even a knife. Will have nothing in its arsenal if we don't have an export promotion authority. If you go into arms talks working for disarmament and you have already unilaterally disarmed, there's no reason for anybody to listen to you. Accounting, my favorite subject. Mr. Hochberg, with generally accepted accounting principles, you have a profit of $750 million. Is that correct?
Last year was 675 to be precise.
Okay. And up on the board, whenever a Republican is speaking, we have the debt clock. So that debt would be $675 million higher if we had abolished your bank a year ago.
Yes, and furthermore, CBO has actually scored the Ex-Im budget initially at $1 billion for deficit reduction, has cut that about in half due to the uncertainty of the reauthorization.
And that's with reserves for the risk that you're taking of default. Just like any insurance company, any lender can calculate its profit only after determining what is an actuarially sound reserve for bad debts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I've heard that there's this thing called I don't know if it's called fair value accounting. I think it's better called fantasy value accounting, that would say that you should determine your profit or loss not based on whether you have a profit or loss, but whether you would have a profit or loss in some artificially constructed fair world. And as you've heard me say before, in a fair world, Jack's Pizzeria would have the same cost of funds as Pizza Hut. Now, if you really know Jack, you would not lend him money. But in a fair world, he might have the same cost of funds, and then he'd have a profitable, or Pizza Hut would have a higher cost of funds. But if Pizza Hut had to pay, when it borrowed money, the risk premium that is appropriate for Jack, they'd be out of business. So in the real world, generally accepted accounting principles, those are the same principles used by all the other lenders in the country. Is that correct? And do you show a profit?
Well, the U.S. government uses FICRA, Federal Credit Reform Act, and by that, we put aside reserves, as you mentioned, Congressman, about $5 billion worth of reserves, and the rest goes to the taxpayers. Any change in accounting would actually just increase reserves, and then they would be released to the taxpayers.